Welcome to the Business Talk, a global podcast series that highlights distinguished faculty members and their impactful scholarly contributions. I'm Deepak, your host from India. We are honored to welcome Dr. Francis de Véricourt as our distinguished guest on Business Talk today. Before we get started, I would like to introduce the guest for today's episode. Dr. Francis de Véricourt thinks at the intersection of mathematics, machines, and human judgment, and has spent his career building institutions that do the same. A professor of management science at ESMT Berlin, Dr. Francis founded the Institute for Deep Tech Innovation, a hub where translational breakthroughs in biotechnology, digital health, and artificial intelligence move from lab to real world impact. He holds the Joachim Faber Chair in Business and Technology and is the co author of Framers, a Penguin Random House title named among the Financial Times Best Books of the Year. His academic journey traces a global spanning arc from doctoral training at University Paris 6 and a master's in applied mathematics and computer science at Grenoble Institute of Technology to postdoctoral research at MIT, faculty roles at Duke University and INSEAD, where he held the Paul Dubrul Chair in Sustainable Development, and ultimately to ESMT Berlin, where he served as an inaugural Associate Dean of Research and established the Center for Decisions, Models and Data. He has lived and worked in France, the United States, Germany, and Singapore. Professor Francis' research explores how decisions get made and how analytics, operations, and emerging AI can make them better, particularly in healthcare and sustainability. His work appears in flagship journals including Management Science, Operations Research, and the American Economic Review, and has earned him distinguished honors such as the ENRE and MSOM Best Publication Awards from Informs. He serves as department editor at both Operations Research and MSOM. In the classroom, Professor Francis brings the same rigor to MBA and Executive MBA students that he applies to his research. A seasoned executive educator and frequent speaker at academic and industry forums, he translates complex ideas into decisions that leaders can actually use. In today's episode, Dr. Francis de Véricourt joins us to explore the core ideas from his acclaimed book, Framers, Make Better Decisions in the Age of Big Data. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Francis de Véricourt to the conversation. Professor Francis, it's a distinct privilege to welcome you to Business Talk. We are grateful to you for accepting our invitation.
Thanks. I mean, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Professor, the book opens with a bold challenge to conventional wisdom that humans are good at decisions, not bad. What was the moment or research insight that made you and your co-authors confident enough to argue against this dominant narrative that more data and less human judgment is the answer?
I mean, it's more, let us step back a little bit. It's more data is helpful. Machines are helpful. The only thing is that the way machines make decisions or predict are different from the way we human beings are making decisions and predicting. So it's not that machines are bad. It's more that they are different, and we excel in things that are fundamentally different than what machines can do. You asked me gave me confidence. In fact, if you look at the history of science, I'm not going to give you one paper in particular. I'm going to give you the whole history of scientific discovery, and also in my own work, you can retell the history of the scientific progress as a history of representing the world and reframing. So examples, Newton comes with a model of the world, and it did not have much data to make claims about what happened on the moon because nobody went on the moon before him. So he didn't have data, and yet he could do inference about what's happening there. And then there was this huge revolution, which is Einstein came in. And Einstein could make predictions about the existence of black hole. No data existed at his time that was any indicative that there was such a thing as a black hole. So it's not that a particular paper, it's just you look at the history of human genius and you see that again and again, what distinguish human innovation, discovery, decisions is really radically different from the way AI is working today.
Professor describes framing as a cognitive muscle, not just a metaphor. For someone who has never heard the term used in this way, How would you explain what a frame actually is and what it feels like to use one consciously for the first time?
So, I mean, first, if you pay attention, you always think in frames. You're not maybe aware of it, but you always think in these. Another word for it is mental model. So basically, a frame or mental model, which is the more academic terms for frames, is an abstract representation about how the world works. I mean, I would put it like that. So, for instance, you can think of um, if I ask you how is the Earth, planet Earth working, what you have in your mind right away is a sphere. So you have an abstract representations of a sphere to represent Earth. But then if I ask you, how do you find your way where you live in a new town, let's say, which street to take? Now you have a different abstract representation, which is more a flat representation with streets. So each time you're facing a decision and a problem, you are going to elicit a representation that helps you work within that model to make inference. We use these in the book, but for me, the best, and that's how I use it with in my workshops and with my students, is if I give you a map of where I come from, the city of Paris, or let's say I'm going to take London, and I show you the streets, you have a nice representation of the street and it helps you navigate and walk around. But this map is useless if you want to take the subway. And if I show you a map of the subway, it looks totally different than the map of the streets. And yet it's an abstract representation, it's abstract, but that helps you navigate your way with the subway system. So that analogy works for everything. Any decisions you make, you start to form a representations about how things works and you leverage that to decide and innovate.
Professor, the book treats causal reasoning as a central to reframing. In a world where machine learning thrives on correlation, why do you believe that understanding cause and effect remains a distinctly human superpower that AI cannot replicate, at least not yet?
I think you said it. I mean, I think what AI is doing in the end is only correlations. There's absolutely no causal claim. I mean, ChatGPT will tell you there is a causal link, but the truth is that AI is extremely powerful at uncovering associations, patterns, correlation in data sets that we do not perceive necessarily, but those are just correlations. And because you need a lot of data to find those patterns, and that the success of OpenAI and Claude is that you had the internet that give you gazillions and gazillions amount of data on languages. For AI to make good predictions, you have to have a lot of data. The key difference with us is we can make good predictions, relatively accurate predictions, without the data. So the metaphor I usually use is the 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 machine's AI to make a prediction is basically stuck on the data on which it has been trained. It can only make prediction that is close to the data on which it is trained. So it must have seen something similar in the past. We can make prediction on things that we never saw in the past. That's why we can innovate new things. And that's why, again, going back to the Einstein example, he could foresee the existence of black holes where there were no data about it. So our ability is to make predictions far away from the data. The machine's ability is to find very rich patterns, but that are only correlations, not causations in the data. And that's why this is our superpower, because we can infer stuff without having the complete data, or at least in the way the machine will need to have it.
Professor, you argue that imagining counterfactuals, what if things were different, is core to good framing. Can you walk us through a real world example, perhaps from business or public health, where reframing a counterfactual lead to a dramatically better outcome?
So just to first start to explain what is these mechanisms of and why we can do powerful counterfactual. Um, because we have models of how the world works, right? So we have causal in our mind. When you play with a model, you have causal claim about if I do A, then B happens. And then we can start to play with, okay, if I change something, I use my frame to constrain what I can imagine. And that's what we call counterfactual. And so I'm going to, I mean, in business, you do that all the time, right? In business, what you call a business model, like think about the word business model. When you have a new startup, you try to do something fundamentally new. You build a model and abstract representations about why your idea will work, and then you play with that model to try to infer what will be the frictions you're going to face, how much money you're going to make, what is your customer base that you need to target. All that are counterfactuals because it does not exist yet. And if your startup and your idea is truly new, it has not been existed in the past. Okay, so that's the business example. And if I go to a more like, so I do not know if it's public health example is more, I mean, it's linked. I guess I will use global warming. The way we know that there is such a thing as global warming, that is, we are human responsible for the global warming. It's not because we have the data per se. It's because we have model that represent an Earth without human on it. So we have this abstract counterfactual that tell us if I take out human, then there is no global warming. No, data plays a key role because you need to calibrate that. But it's fundamental is because we can simulate what's going to happen if we were not on this planet, something that we cannot directly observe. We will have to kill everyone on Earth to see what's happening, and then there will be nobody alive then to record any temperature. But it's really like a drug treatment. It's like you need the counterfactual, you need the patients who does not receive the drug to see what's going on, except that we do not have these patients because we only have one Earth. So we can do abstract models and leverage that to do counterfactual. So it's the same principle using in business fundamentally than you're using for global warming. And health is the same thing. It's like when you have a pandemic, your ability to see how the pandemic is going to evolve in the future. It's a new virus, corona, for instance. You can predict what's going to happen. Not precisely maybe, but you know that you're going to have problems with your hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is, again, counterfactual because this virus is totally new, never happened before, and you building models can predict or do a counterfactual about what can happen.
Professor, one of the surprising arguments in your book is that constraints actually enable better framing rather than limit it. This feels counterintuitive. Can you unpack why boundaries and restrictions make us better decision makers, not worse?
So if you don't have boundaries in your thinking, you basically can imagine whatever you want. And then, yes, you're going to be much more creative and have very many more ideas. But none of those ideas are going to work. The fact that you constrain yourself in a certain way, it controls what you can imagine to guarantee that you are going to have some success. And in fact, going back to, again, this story about scientific discovery, what you're going to see that very often scientists, they relax a constraint and replace it by another one. I'm carry over this Einstein since I'm started with that, but it's basically Einstein basically break a very hard constraint of Newton, which is the law of physics is the same at any speed at any speed for every one of us. We have the same law of physics. He break that constraint to say, no, depending on your speed, you have different laws of physics. But he has a new constraint, which is there's a limit to the speed of light. And when you see also, again, many examples of business, they do the same thing. They constrain themselves on some aspect and then relax other aspects. So it's the same if you want to have productive ideas that is going to work, and if you want to reframe, you may also unconstrain some aspect, but you need to add something to increase the probability that your ideas are not just your dreams, but something that will have an impact in the world.
Professor, frames can also trap us. History is full of leaders who were locked into one frame and couldn't exhale. How do you distinguish between a frame that is usefully anchoring and one that has become dangerously rigid? And how do you break out the latter?
So I mean, the way I understand your question is, so basically, there is no good and bad frames. So any model, it's like as if you're telling me what is better, a hammer or a screwdriver. It's not that one is better. It depends on the context you are in. So do you use the right tool for the right context you are in? So do you use the right representation of the world in the context you are in? Again, going back to the example of the map, you do not want to use a map of a sphere like Earth, when you try to find your way in a city, this sphere is totally useless to you. I mean, you may argue this is more accurate to represent Earth, maybe, but it's useless to you. But if you want to take the subway, you don't use the sphere, you use these weird maps of subway. So basically, depending on the context, the art of framing is to leverage the right representation. Now, what's happening often in leadership also is that what you see people is when they have a frame that works, they tend to hang on it too long and they don't realize that the contexts have changed and they still apply the same way of seeing the world. And that's where it's become a problem because you start to make decisions, you start to use a hammer while you should use a screwdriver. And the ability to change, and I mean, a corollary to that is that the more you are in power, the more it's easy to convince yourself that your approach is the right one because nobody will tell you, no, no, change tool. And that's a bit the problem. So if you look at a leader and you see this leader applying no matter what the same view of the world, then there is a problem. Okay, then it means that person is not adapting to the reality of the world. And there are great examples of this right now, but I'm not going to get into politics.
Professor, given your work at the Institute for Deep Tech Innovation and with AI and digital health, how do you see the relationship between AI tools and human framing evolving? Will AI eventually generate frames, or will it always need a human framer to give it direction?
So I mean, of course, I strongly believe that we will do the framing. We will. It needs. In fact, like you can when you use AI, the data you provide to answer questions is a way to constrain what AI can do. And so you use your own framing to understand which type of data I need to constrain AI to give me an answer. So that's already a part of framing. And so we will still be part of that process. Now, that things changes, and so the way we're going to constrain AI and agenting AI may changes, but we still are going to orchestrate all that. And if you are better framers, you're better able to do that. One of for me, the most powerful aspect of AI, since you're talking about deep tech innovation, so the most powerful and helpful aspect of AI in deep tech innovation is that AI helps humans reframe. So basically, sometimes AI can find patterns in the data that makes us realize that all frames needs to be readjusted. And then we create new frames. It's not AI that creates the new frame. It's us who create new representation. I'm going to give you an example, which is old now. But if you remember AlphaGo, which was the program that DeepMind created, who beat Lee Sedol at the time, it was already 10 years ago, gosh. And it was really a shock to everyone that an AI system could beat a human player. And there's a very famous move during that game. So AlphaGo, the AI system, made a move that surprised everyone. Nobody understood why his move was so good. They thought it was a mistake. And in the end, his move enabled AlphaGo to win. After that move, basically Go players use this type of move to rethink the way they were playing AlphaGo. And they changed the way they framed the problem of AlphaGo. They shift their thinking, and then they started to play differently. It's not AlphaGo who said, think this way. Just AlphaGo just played and said, look, boom, this move, for whatever reason, is super good. I cannot tell you why it's good, me AlphaGo, because I'm stupid, but boom, that moves, think about it. And then humans start to think about it and start to rethink and develop new understanding. So in drug discovery, it's the same thing is happening. Suddenly you have AI who tells you, look, try this type of drugs. Nobody thought about this type of drugs. And then you ask yourself, oh, why this type of drugs might works? And then again, you develop a mental model or a model of why it works. So that's where I find the most exciting that AI can help us become better framer. And it's not AI that is going to be to do the framing for you.
Professor, beyond the academic community, many of our listeners and readers are managers and executives whose decisions really unfold in isolation. They are made within teams, hierarchies, and organizations. What happens when different people in a team are operating from different frames? And how do leaders create conditions where better collective framing emerges?
So diversity of frame is a strength. We want that. and I think in societies. But it comes at a cost. So typically, the way, I mean, that's also what I teach when I especially with executives, is basically you have two paradigms. You have a paradigm which I would call decision making and innovations, where in fact you want to have diversity of frames because you want to make sure that you have look at all different aspects, approach, type of counterfactuals, so that you can create new ideas and make sure you have the information you need. So diversity is key there. The problem is when you try to execute, because leadership management is not only about deciding and innovating, it's also making things happen. Most of the time is good executions, coordinations, motivations. And there, basically, you need to shift from that diversity of frames in a shared frame that no, suddenly everybody needs to work in the same understanding to be efficient. So in an organization, the art of leadership in many ways is the ability to shift from moments where I'm embracing diversity of frames, I make sure my team are anchored on different frames, and then I need to manage that diversity into one big frame that everybody agrees to operate in, which is not easy because there are frictions when you have diversity of frames. So that's basically this art of changing paradigm, diversity to one share frames is hard, but that's the way I think leaders need to think about it.
Professor, the book makes a case that exposure to diverse frames through travel, cultures, discipline, and makes people better understanding frameworks. You yourself have lived and worked in France, USA, Germany, and Singapore. How has that geographic and intellectual journey personally sharpened your own framing ability?
Oh, thank you. That's a very, very beautiful question. I think indeed, I think so. Here you pointed out having a multicultural experience is one of the most powerful way to have the flexibility to change your ability to frame. So in fact, so I mean, I'm going to spend a bit of time on that. I'm sorry, but it's a very, very important point. I grew up in France, as you noticed, and in many ways, I am a French product from the French education system. From my culture, my parents are French, my grandparents are French. So for me, what happened for me as an individual is when I went the first time I left abroad was, as you mentioned, at MIT, at Boston, and then suddenly I had to learn and was confronted with different way of thinking. And here, so the different framings was in France is there's something very socialist about France. It's about kind of making sure everybody's equal. And when I went to the US, I saw that it's more opportunities and it's on you to become your own decision maker, leader of your own life. So it's a very different approach. And then you go to Asia, which I love Asian culture, Indian in particular. My sister-in-law is Indian, so I really, really love it. Also Chinese culture. What is common is that no, the difference is the family, the network, the social networks is even more important than what you can see in Europe or in the US. No, I'm mentioning that because for me it's adapting. So I had to rewire my brain, and it's a very healthy exercise. But I compare now with my own kids, and my own kids, they are like basically three cultural. They have the German culture, the French culture, and the American culture, a bit of the Asian culture. And I can see how for them it's native and the ability to shift frames, and I could observe that in them to also your language also frame the way you think. So their ability to shift the way they speak is really a powerful things and give them a lot of cognitive flexibility. So I will encourage everyone to, even though of course we are in monocultures in many ways, but to embrace and be curious about how other people think, not being judgmental. Sometimes it can be a bit shocking, but try to understand the world from this different perspective. And the more you do that, the more cognitive flexibility you build in, and you start to see the same problem differently that enables you to be innovative even in your social environment.
Professor, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. You close the book with a note of urgency that if we surrender framing to algorithms, we risk losing something irreplaceable. What is the one thing you would want every reader, every student, every executive to walk away doing differently to protect and strengthen their framing muscle?
I think it's, I mean, I will use, I know it's a strong word, but I will use two words. Reframe to be judgmental of the way others see the world, even though it can really go against your own values, your own reframe first. No, there's values. I mean, and I'm not saying you should give up what you believe strongly, but reframe. And so be non-judgmental and empathic. So by empathy, I mean, try to see how others see the world with their frames, because their view of the world, again, there's no good and bad frames. I mean, their view of the world may at some point be useful to you. So maybe some people do not believe in God and they say like, oh, you don't believe in God is crazy. But you can see that when you are in very tough situations, how this belief or this view that there is a God might help people to go through tough time. So yeah, you don't use it now, but at some point, who knows, maybe it will help you, or vice versa. Like people who strongly believe in God and think that God explained everything, trying to understand what freedom not believing in God gives you. So I'm taking an extreme case. Is it doesn't mean that you need to stop believing in God, but don't be judgmental. Like really try to understand how do they see the world, because it's not that there is a bad or a good way per se. It depends on the context you are in. So understand that context, understand why they think like that, and maybe there is something I can use for myself instead of being like clash of beliefs, clash of friends, polarizations, which only leads to destruction.
Professor Francis, this conversation has been a masterclass in thinking about thinking. You reminded us that in a world racing toward automation, the most powerful tool we have isn't in our devices. It's in how we frame the world around us. Thank you for sharing your insight, your research, and the ideas behind framework with us today. For our listeners, if there's a one takeaway from this episode, let it be this. Your frames shape your future. Choose them wisely. And if today's conversation sparked something in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy of Framers, Make Better Decisions in the Age of Big Data, and dive deep. It is a book that will genuinely change the way you think. Thank you, Professor Francis, for so generously sharing your time and this fascinating work with us today. And it has been a truly enlightening conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure, Deepak.